Live, this is Steve Price.
Good evening, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us on this Friday night. It seems the new Premier of Victoria, Ben Carroll, has finally realised just saying you're not Daniel Andrews will not be enough to save the Labor Party from an electoral disaster come November. He is giving interviews to just about anyone who asks, unlike his predecessor, Jacinta Allen, who really spoke to no one. He even pledged in a rather unusual comment today to the Australian's Anthony Galloway that there would be no more backroom deals done in hotels on his watch. More on that shortly. Coming up on Steve Price program tonight, a warning from the Australian Medical Association that the federal government's urgent care clinics are not, I repeat, not helping fix the problem of emergency department overcrowding. We'll get the latest from the AMA shortly. One Nation this week unveiled part of its upper house team for the state election in Victoria and announced Warren Pickering as their Victorian leader. He joined us on the program as well. And still on Victorian politics, critics of the government make the point that the handcuffs on the local corruption watchdog IBAC are not fit for purpose and don't even compare with interstate corruption bodies like New South Wales ICAC and similar bodies in Queensland. Friday regular and former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman will join us, plus Mark Knight will be with us as he is each couple of weeks. But first up tonight, what is it about Daniel Andrews, the three-time election-winning former Premier of Victoria, that so upsets the people of that state? This week, Andrews was out crowing about the findings of an 8-year inquiry by Victoria's corruption watchdog IBAC. Now, the inquiry had interviewed Andrews in camera, in secret, over his involvement in a deal done behind the back of the relevant minister, Jane Garrett. Now, it involved the union boss of the firefighters, the union boss Peter Marshall, and an Andrews minister, Gavin Jennings, that saw the Rural Fighting Service, the CFA, folded into Marshall's United Firefighters Union, and a pay deal was done. Minister Garrett, by the way, quit after she was sidelined by Andrews, and tragically, Jane Garrett died from cancer. The IBAC inquiry and Peter Credlin have done a lot of work on this story. It was called Operation Richmond. Now, its report was released on Tuesday, and Daniel Andrews and Marshall were cleared of all corruption, but still heavily criticised. The findings have again sparked debate about the construction of a statue of the former Premier Daniel Andrews to be made in bronze, with work apparently already underway. If completed, the cost is north of $134,000. Now, that's not a king's ransom, but for many, still a stupid, including me, waste of money. Now, Shadow Treasurer and Federal Victorian Liberal MP Tim Wilson, he was asked about this crazy, dumb statue idea on Breakfast TV today.
You know, I don't think Dan Andrews should want this statue, frankly, because I think it's a serious risk of becoming a public urinal if it's erected. Today we have Ben Carroll, the new Premier, out there saying that he's cutting back on major public projects because the state can't afford it. The first minor public project that should be cut should be Dan Andrews' statue, because that does not sit on any hierarchy of a single Victorian and their priorities.
A lot of chatter about this in Victoria today. Our Victorian State political reporter, Georgie Dickinson, well, she took to the streets to get an opinion from the public on Dan's statue.
$34,000, is it a good use of taxpayer money?
Really? Is it that much? Yeah. Oh, no. OK, no, definitely not.
Which Premier?
Specifically, $134,000 is being spent on a statue of former Premier Daniel Andrews.
I'm going to say no to that one.
I think he's had enough spent on him, don't you?
It's embarrassing that they're going to build something for him.
Never.
What do you think it should be used on?
Homeless. Yeah. There's a lot more important things than Dan Andrews.
I even went down today to look at the existing bronze premiers that include Sir Henry Bolte, John Cain Jr. The statues were one of the dumber ideas that was had by the former Premier, Jeff Kennett. Now, if you hold that office for 3,000 days, this was the Kennett idea, as Premier, you get a statue. But Tim Wilson's probably right when he talked about the defacing of any Dan Andrews statue. Now, I'm not condoning that for one moment, but the public would not be able to resist. Now, the new Premier, Ben Carroll, has not commented one way or another. Well, he said, I'm not about building statues, but he's not commented one way or another, as far as I can work out, whether the statue should be cast, if it's already underway, how much has been spent, and will it be placed outside his office. But he would be wise, in my opinion, to dump it. Now, he needs to toughen his language when reflecting on some of the things his two predecessors did over the nearly 12 years they were in power. After the Operation Richmond report was released, the toughest language that he could think of in regard to the backroom deals done by Andrews and Marshall was that it was, quote, intolerable and poor. I mean, seriously? That's as tough as you're going to get? And on the money pit that is the suburban rail loop, he has said his government, due for an election in 4 months' time, has gone from the big build to the big reset, whatever that means. Does it mean ripping up contracts? He said he won't do that. I mean, two giant boring machines are due to start their job boring those tunnels before the November election, supposedly to allow the former Premier Jacinda Allen to stick on a hard hat, gather up some nodding heads and say, see, I told you we'd build this thing. What this all probably means is that Melbourne will have an underground train running from a place called Chiltern to a place called Box Hill, and that's it. I mean, Carroll sensibly would prefer to build a train line to the airport, which Melbourne desperately needs. And that should have been the priority all along. And just finally on that stupid statue, a Herald Sun poll today had 74% of Melburnians, 74%, saying it was a waste of money and should not go ahead. OK, I want to turn my attention now to a story that emerged this week. Now, doctors are warning that Victoria's, and this is a federal program, taxpayer-funded urgent care clinics sold to us by governments as a solution to emergency department overcrowding, are doing little to ease pressure on the hospitals, while at the same time undermining local GP practices. There are now 38 urgent care clinics across Victoria and many more right across the nation. Many of them opened in 2023 to provide bulk billed treatment for urgent but non-life-threatening illnesses and injuries, and with the promise that they keep people out of the emergency department. Sounds like a good idea, but is it working? Danielle McMullen is the president of the Australian Medical Association, joins me now. Dr McMullen, the federal government says these clinics are taking pressure off the emergency departments, but the frontline emergency doctors say, well, it's making almost no difference.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen. It is, the data would show that while we are seeing a small drop in the lower urgency emergency department presentations, they aren't what was clogging up our emergency departments to start with and leaving them in logjam. In fact, we've seen right around the country, including in Victoria, an increase in the overall demand for emergency. So while the minor stuff might be going elsewhere, overall we're still seeing more people go to emergency and they're sicker, there's more complex illness, it's harder for them to move through the hospital system. That's what's causing our hospital logjam and where our attention really needs to be focused.
Yeah, and I mean, just on that, I presume that the cost of private health insurance is not helping either, and the federal government, in its wisdom, has decided that anyone over the age of 65 who was getting a discount on their private health rebate, their insurance, are now no longer going to get that rebate, and so that's going to cause a lot more people, Danielle, I presume, to drop out of private health insurance.
Yes, certainly the cost of premiums is rising, and a number of Australians across all age groups are questioning that value for money. Times are tight. People are making difficult decisions about healthcare, food on the table, fuel in the car. It is difficult out there, and I think insurers could lift their game to be offering more of that value for money. It remains to be seen, how big the change is from that change to the rebate for over 65s, but particularly for pensioners on a fixed income, we are worried that it'll lead to a drop in cover and potentially have a flow-on effect to our hospitals that are already, as I said, blocked up. We've seen in some other states, politicians telling people not to go to emergency unless it's a real emergency because of the flu season. And yet winter comes year after year. We shouldn't be surprised by these things, and we really do need longer term solutions to help our hospitals and our health system stay on track.
Yeah, I hope the federal government rethinks that aged care change. I would think it'd be a wise thing to do. Give me some sense of how crowded our major emergency department waiting rooms get, and are any states better or worse than others?
Right around the country, they're under pressure, and our doctors and nurses and administrative staff are doing everything they can. And we'll see. I mean, if you're critically unwell and you need to be seen in emergency, do go. You will get the care that you need, but they're often noisy, crowded environments. Our staff are being worked to the bone. People are often spending hours or days in emergency departments because the hospital is full. And this just shows that we really need investments in general practice to keep people out of hospital, better infrastructure in our hospitals to keep them flowing smoothly, and investments in home and aged care so that people, once they're well enough, can be discharged home with the supports they need.
Let's talk about the funding of general practice. Obviously, you're the head of the AMA. Is general practice being funded correctly and with enough funding? And would it not be better, rather than building more of these urgent care centres, to plough the money into general practice?
That is an excellent point, and one we've been making for many years. We think the structure underlying Medicare in general practice is out of date. It's built for a time 40 years ago when you had a simple health problem. Now, with the growing burden of chronic disease, mental health issues, complex illness, we really need a change in the rebate structures so that no matter how long you need to spend with your GP, you get a fair rebate back in your pocket. Because at the moment, if you need to be spending any more than about 10 minutes with the GP, your rebate value really drops off, and that's where we're seeing those rising costs.
Doctor, the government does make a lot of noise about how the level of bulk billing has increased. Is that a fact?
After changes made in the last year or so, we have seen an increase in the bulk billing rate. There's been a significant incentive put in place to try and support more bulk billing. We've particularly seen that picked up in outer metropolitan areas. Some of the clinics that used to be bulk billing and weren't anymore have gone back to it. But how sustainable that change is really remains to be seen. And there's still that time pressure. And so, some patients are saying that and doctors saying those consultations need to be quicker. It's harder to do multiple things in one visit. So in the long term, we think a better investment would be in improving that comprehensive care, funding for longer consultations, more nurses and allied health in our practices, so we can really prevent that severe illness that then at the moment is winding up in emergency.
Just before we go, how stretched are we in regional Australia? How hard is it for, isolated regional towns to get a doctor?
Anything that our viewers in the city think are tough waiting times and hard to get access, it is amplified manyfold in rural areas. Really, challenging to get workforce, not just doctors, but our nursing and allied health staff and the infrastructure. So we do need to keep really plugging away at getting more doctors trained. We know that getting students from the bush, training them in the bush, they're more likely to stay out there. And that's why we're pushing for things like extension of the prac payments to medical students to encourage more regional students and more training out in rural areas so that we can keep doctors out there, because it is a fantastic lifestyle, but we really need to be boosting our workforce supply.
Great to catch up, Daniel McMullen. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's the boss of the AMA. OK, well, it's been another big week for One Nation, particularly in Victoria this week. We had the launch of One Nation's upper house candidates, and we saw Pauline Hanson unveil the team that she hopes, I guess, is going to make a big dent in the polling for the Victorian election, which is due on the 28th of November. So it's just about 4 months away. A couple of familiar faces in the launch. Colleen Harkin. You've seen Colleen here on News24 before. She was, until recently, a senior Victorian Liberal. And Mark Nicholson, who's a regular on Chris Kenny's program here on News24. He's the brains behind that hugely successful One Nation cartoon, Please Explain. He's a ripper bloke as well. He's going to now become a politician, but standing right next to Senator Hanson, her newly appointed Victorian Party leader and President Warren Pickering, who, if you don't know, and I read the description of what Warren's done in the past. He's not like one of these people who was just a political advisor and then ended up being a politician. He's been a bricklayer, he was a soldier, he worked in the coal industry, and he actually quit his job during COVID-19. I'm pleased to say Warren Pickering joins me now. How's your first week in charge officially been?
It's been fantastic. Thanks for having me, Steve, and good evening to your audience. Look, it has been fantastic. The feedback has been phenomenal, not only from within the membership, but more broadly from the state. So it's been really good.
So you're going to lead the party into that November 28 election. I mean, obviously I'm based in Victoria, so I've had to live through the majority of the last 10, 12 years of the Labor government. I've got a place that's near, a crime-ridden main street. There's people there who are drug-affected, homeless all over the joint. What can One Nation do if you do get numbers in the State House that you can work with? What can you do to things like a crime crisis?
So a crime crisis, I think we need to take the traditional approach. There needs to be repercussions for crimes in this state. We've gone soft and we've seen bleeding heart judges and their tag and release programs. There's no longer consequences for any of those actions, and now we're seeing that escalate, obviously. I think there's numerous other areas which we can identify and apply pressure to make serious changes in that space, and they can be cost effective as well. It literally comes down to making sure people are accountable for their actions.
What are you going to do about the state debt? I mean, that's crippling. The amount of interest that we pay on a weekly basis as Victorians is just criminal. And the people who've put us into that debt, two of the main offenders, Daniel Andrews and Jacinda Allen, have now walked away. They'll both be on lifetime pensions. What can you do to help Victorians in a state where Labor has sent us broke, much of it with money on corrupt big build projects, Warren?
I don't think Victorians are asking for too much. Successive Labor governments have broken the social contract and they're failing in all measurable metrics across the state. Now, I think we need to lean back into the free market economics that made us the most prosperous state in the nation in the first place. We need to abolish this net zero garbage. That'll save us $200 billion a year in taxpayer subsidies. We need to look at farms and small to medium businesses, help them to increase cash flow and make Victoria an attractive place to invest once again. Best way to do that in the short term is to abolish some of these crippling taxes that have decimated the small to medium business sector. So, the payroll tax, land tax, fire services levy, get rid of a lot of it and allow the free market to do what it does. Government needs to get out of its own way in this space. And I think that will put us on the right trajectory to start paying down some of that debt. Not in the short term, but maybe in the next few years.
Speaking about farmers, I mean, we've got this ridiculous situation where the Labor Party passed laws that farmers can't deny access to their own private properties to put in transmission lines for this green dream that we're experiencing. Would you be arguing to appeal that, change that law and allow farmers to say to someone, you're not coming through my gate, mate?
We intend to be staunch advocates for the regions, as the One Nation Party has always been. So day one, week one, is to restore farmers' rights to refuse entry. Absolutely. Number two is to restore the actual meaningful community consultation processes surrounding all of these types of projects. We've got an inherent responsibility here because 30% of Australia's domestic produce, food and fibre, is still produced here in Victoria. I think not many people are aware of that fact. So we have an inherent responsibility to ensure that our regional areas remain fit for purpose and utilised for primary food production.
We saw in the event that was held in Hawthorn during the week that there was a bunch of protesters out the front, calling Pauline Hanson and anybody from One Nation, labelling you racist and fascist. Are you getting enough protection from the police? And do you expect these protests to disrupt the election campaign where One Nation is standing in seats?
Look, that's continually something that we need to address on a day-to-day basis, not only around campaign times, but any events we have. It's pretty disheartening to see when you live in what's supposedly a democratic nation. We can't even book venues without, the other side of politics jumping on it and leaving bad Google reviews and things like that. We had at the last federal election, one of our older candidates was pushed to the ground and broke his shoulder. So, look, it is a concern, and I've had it on pretty good authority from a few people that early this year at the Marxist conference in Melbourne that they've actually encouraged a lot of their support network to engage in militant style behaviour against Conservatives. So it is an absolute concern, and it will continue to be a concern. So we'll just manage it as we go.
Just finally, Warren, I mean, I was a little bemused today where Pauline Hanson's copped it for using One Nation Party funds rather than their own funds to pay for some accommodation in her trip to the UK. I would have thought people would have been making more of a noise if she'd used taxpayers' money, like Chris Bowen, who spent $118,000 on a 7-day trip to New York. I mean, at least Pauline's using One Nation money and not taxpayers' money to fly around the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a story about nothing. You know, this party obviously attracts a certain level of scrutiny that's just, it's not reasonable comparatively. Most of our membership and supporters and donors, they understand that money would be utilised to develop the party and its messaging. And if our fearless national leader chooses to go to another country and propel her message further or engage with other Conservatives around the planet and encourage them to show her on ways that we can implement legislation that they're intending to implement in their countries, then that's her prerogative. I just think they should apply, the media should apply the same level of scrutiny to, like you say, Chris Bowen, but even, you know, specifically around the COP31 conference that taxpayers are expected to pay for. Surely that's a bigger story.
Indeed. Daniel Andrews' statue, yes or no?
Look, a lot of people would argue with me, but I think politicians are a necessary evil. However, I'm totally against immortalising them in statues. And then we've got this other nonsense of the ongoing expense because we know it's just not an initial outlay. This thing's going to be defaced on a weekly basis and it's going to be an ongoing expense for Victorians. So, yeah, I'm a hard no.
Good on you, Warren. Thank you. Thank you for catching up with us tonight. Warren Pickering there, the new state leader for One Nation in Victoria. Now, just quickly before I get to the break, I want to mention the outcome of a bail hearing in Melbourne. We're talking there about law and order. 4 youths were charged over a violent attack which has led to the death of a much-loved Sunshine shopkeeper. They are now, believe it or not, back walking on Melbourne streets after being granted bail. 2 boys aged, listen to the ages here, 12 and 13, were freed on bail earlier in the week. 2 others, 2 14-year-old girls, were granted bail in the Children's Court today. And a 15-year-old boy, the only one of the 5 accused to be charged with manslaughter, he remains on remand. You have to ask the question, when are Victorians, we're crying out for a government to fix its justice system, what are you going to do to fix up people being bailed willy-nilly? All right, after the break, more on the Richmond report and those findings on Daniel Andrews, 8 years in the making, plus the housing black hole. Labor is dreaming if it thinks its tax changes are helping young people get into houses. That's next. Welcome back. Steve Price with you on this Friday night. We'll cross to the UK shortly where the new Prime Minister, can you believe this, he's been 2 weeks into the job, just 2 weeks. Well, he's gone off on holiday already. But now to those IBAC findings from Victoria's corruption watchdog, a scathing report into the way the Andrews government operated, describing repeated failures of governance, accountability and due process. I've read most of the report. It doesn't make for very impressive reading, I've got to say. It's further evidence that for years politics in Victoria was put ahead of proper process, yet despite the findings, no one appears to be held responsible. I mean, Daniel Andrews came out and said it cleared him. Friday night regular former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman, of course, he has run a government, a state government. He joins us. Campbell, I don't know how much you've looked at IBAC, given you're based in Queensland, but if this investigation, Operation Richmond, had been carried out in Queensland, I'm tipping it would be a very different outcome for Daniel Andrews and other Labor politicians.
Steve, it certainly would. And the background of that is that after the Fitzgerald inquiry of the late 80s, it was realised in Queensland that there were goings on which wouldn't have met the threshold of criminal conduct in terms of what some of the ministers of that day had got up to, and that the bar needed to be lower. It needed to be lowered because the overall impact of what people had been doing had destroyed faith in the processes of government. So the Crime and Corruption Commission that we have today, which is the successor of a number of previous organisations, has legislation that, in my opinion, would have seen, in the circumstances of what's gone on in Victoria, led to quite a different outcome. I mean, we'll never know, but I would just simply say, on having read some of the Operation Richmond material, I would say quite right now that a Special Minister of State Jennings would be in deep doo-doo. So would the public servants, Eccles and Bates. The Premier would probably have had a finding of corruption against him too, under the Queensland definitions. As to his removal, well, that would come down to how the Crime and Corruption Commission placed or played the whole matter. But the bottom line is, clearly, Steve, Victoria needs a change to the law. It needs to mirror Queensland or New South Wales. But I'll say one thing. We're also seeing this these open hearings with IBAC in New South Wales, and I would say I wouldn't necessarily go down that route because that leads to a whole lot of rather other unfortunate negative consequences as well.
Yeah, and then we've had ridiculous situations in New South Wales where Barry O'Farrell lost his job over, accepting a bottle of wine, and Gladys Berejiklian was forced to step down because she had a boyfriend who, was not the sort of bloke she should have been hanging out with. But I mean, we've still got, speaking of hanging out, we've still got Jeffrey Watson, KC, in Queensland, in the inquiry into the CFMEU. I mean, he's still saying that the big bill down here has been rorted by $15 billion, and we don't even have our own inquiry here. I mean, Ben Carroll's promised to do one, but, I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, we talked a week ago when I was beside you in Melbourne. A week has gone by. You'd think if this new Premier was serious about integrity, particularly given that he has to demonstrate that whilst he sat in the cabinet room, he does have that integrity after all these things have gone down. And a week's gone on. Come on, Premier, what are you going to actually do about it? I'm sure a few all-nighters and you could have the terms of reference and the thing on the road.
Yeah, just hope he's not waiting to get closer to the election. Let's talk about housing, Campbell. Construction of freestanding homes expected to take a hit despite the negative gearing carve-outs for investors. More doubts about the government's ambitious housing targets. I mean, did you think we'd ever sit here in Australia in 2026 and see housing prices collapse across the country? I mean, Darwin is now the only place that's in positive territory when it comes to the price of houses going up.
What the Labor Party have done, Steve, is completely destabilised the residential property market in this country. There's now great uncertainty. Prices are going down, 10, 15%, depending on the jurisdiction. And in that environment, firstly, people won't invest. So investors have disappeared from the market. Young home buyers then have an issue as well because they're wondering, I'm sure, when they're trying to actually, it might on the face of it look like good news, but then, what are you actually buying? Will you end up in negative equity positions with the young people who've bought in probably the last year or two? So, if I want to I'll cut to the chase. What's required? Stop these silly new laws, create an atmosphere of stability, and for government to get out of the way with the rules, the regulations, the taxes, all the imposts that are put on it, and let builders go out and build homes, let developers actually come up with places where that can happen, and let the free market prevail. And then, as in, for example, in Argentina with Milei, President Milei, with those sorts of reforms, you actually get affordable housing and you get it being built because the free market will operate. But not here in Australia because they keep doubling down.
Yeah, look, I have a fear that both Albanese and Chalmers are not for turning. Let's talk about federal politics. Pauline Hanson, she's under a fair bit of pressure around her Senate colleague Malcolm Roberts. Now, Malcolm Roberts has embraced a whole bunch of fairly kooky conspiracy theories. This is part of the problem for One Nation. I was just speaking to the new Victorian leader of One Nation, and he seems like a pretty genuine sort of bloke. He's been a soldier and he worked in a coal mine, and he's been a builder, all those sorts of things. Malcolm Roberts is causing Pauline some trouble, isn't he?
Well, Malcolm's been a senator for quite some time now, and he's been very loyal to Pauline. I know that, absolutely. Personally, I know how very loyal he has been to her, and Pauline Hanson, I think, always backs people who've been loyal to her, so I think she'll find it very, very difficult. As to Malcolm, I know him well as also, and look, on occasions he's eccentric. He's no dummy. He's a very smart guy, but he's certainly been on occasions in interviews been what I'd say somewhat loose in terms of being prepared to give various ideas the benefit of the doubt. And so here it goes. And then add a fair bit of this extra scrutiny that you were talking about in the previous interview, he's suddenly made out to be a liability. I don't think he's a liability, but then again, I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to serve for the long term with One Nation, because he has been there for some time now. But overall, I think he's given good service to One Nation from their perspective.
Good on you, Campbell. Great to catch up as usual on a Friday night. I'll see you next week. Let's go to the UK now. I can't believe this. No less than 2 weeks after taking the top job, the new Prime Minister of the UK, Andy Burnham, who's been this great saviour who's appeared out of the north and he's going to fix the country and fix all the problems, he's gone on holidays. I mean, can you believe it? 2 weeks after being installed in the job. I don't believe it. Anyway, News24 contributor Adrian Hayes joins me. What has the reaction gone? I mean, this is just crazy.
I think it's a bit of a surprise, Steve. I mean, it's not like he was catapulted in the job at short notice. I mean, he's been planning this for a year. And it's also not, he hasn't got his daughter's wedding in Wagga Wagga that he's been planning for 3 years. I mean, he's been in the job 2 weeks, as you said, and he's gone on holiday. Now, I know the government will say, and they always say this, that the Prime Minister is in control and he'll be working on his laptop in Lanzarote. Yeah, everything's in control, but it doesn't, it isn't a good look. I think the surprise is the most regular emotion of people.
Where's he gone?
They don't know. They won't say that. He's gone abroad, so he's not in Skegness, but because he's very much promoting the north, and I thought he would have gone on holiday up in the north of England, but no, he's gone somewhere abroad. But they're keeping that quite quiet, and I understand that part of things. But it is a surprise. But I think it's a more serious point. It's this culture of entitlement with all our public servants, the civil servants, the working from home, the sickness benefits, in fact, even working from abroad in cases. And I just don't think that so many people in the public service really realise what it's like in the private sector, people who have to do a hard day's work for a living, who can't just take 2 weeks leave 2 weeks into starting a job.
Yeah, I should remind our audience, of course, that August is like Australia's January. I mean, a lot of people do take a break at that time. I mean, the only news I keep seeing regularly coming out of Europe at the moment, Adrian, is how the temperatures are hot, that it's got to 42 degrees in Austria and these fires. Obviously, the people who are, embrace very warmly the idea of global warming and climate change, they think this is great because they can point to it and say, see, we told you so. Is it really that bad?
Look, the wildfires are bad, and they have been, more this year than before. What they don't tell you is so many 500 arsonists have been arrested for causing fires. And I sometimes think, well, what are these arsonists doing it for? But if you look at the stats with a critical thinking mind, there is no more, natural disasters this year than there has been in the past. Having said that, we do accept the Earth is getting warmer. And as I said it before on the show, it's been getting warmer since the 1800s, the 1850s, which was the coldest century in 2000. So we have to adapt to mitigate it. But the Earth is in danger of burning up or we're being boiled alive anytime soon. I've lived in the Middle East. We regularly live in temperatures and work temperatures 45 to 50 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, but you're tough, not like some of these other people who are whinging about things. Nigel Farage, the boss of Reform, he's taken on Tony Abbott's boat strategy. Now, I remember very well the Stop the Boats election campaign, and Tony Abbott went and won 16 seats off the Labor Party. Well, Nigel has said he plans to turn back asylum seekers in the English Channel. Now, we're talking about a much narrower body of water. What we had, of course, was off the north coast of Australia. There was basically no one living up there. But Farage said he'll do this. Tony Abbott was very successful. Will this work for Farage politically?
Well, for starters, everyone, all political parties are now flocking to the channel and saying we're going to do something about stopping the boats. This is the boldest move yet from any party. Now, the detractors are saying that's impossible. We don't have the boat capacity. We don't know what, migrants are going to die in the sea. France won't take them, etc. But all this to me is superfluous. The whole point about it is to stop people coming over to start with. And I think it took Tony Abbott about 4 weeks, if I'm right, for my memories to stop boats. I think this could stop in a week. It is that strong. So all these potential problems, I think, will be are superfluous.
Yeah, it was a two-stage thing here in Australia. I mean, when we took them to Christmas Island originally and then did a deal with Nauru to relocate people. But then ultimately, when we'd emptied out those island facilities, we used the Navy to intercept Indonesian fishing boats, many of them leaking and threatening to sink, and we turned them around, towed them back to Indonesia. But you've got to have the other country, the second country, accept them. Will the French accept them back? That's where they're coming from, I presume.
This is one of the objections which people say, but this is what the role of a leader. We elect leaders to make things happen. If our Prime Minister, whoever it is, I'm not targeting Andy Burnham, cannot go to Emmanuel Macron in France and say, Emmanuel, we want your help to stop the boats. It'll help France, it'll help UK. We want to do this for a few weeks. It'll stop it all. But then use the other one. If you don't, we're going to do it anyway. You've got to show leadership and courage to make this happen. As I said, it's not rocket science. It's a simple case of courage and action.
Adrian, I know you're away for a couple of weeks. We'll catch up with you when you get back. You're probably going on holidays with Andy Burnham, but I doubt that very much. Good on you, mate. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. After the break, folks, cartoons of the week. The great Mark Knight will be in the studio. Welcome back. Time to look back on the last week or two in news and how it's been depicted by our very good friend, the Herald Sun cartoonist Mark Knight. Mark, welcome. You've had such a wealth of stuff to work with. Premiers quitting, people getting elected as new premiers, old premiers coming back and saying, I did nothing wrong.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is incredible when they really fire up.
Victoria, the epicentre.
Oh, it's incredible. Dan Andrews and the Union. What have we drawn about Danny and the Union?
Well, Dan, they released the Richmond report.
Yes.
Which has been suppressed for, 10 years?
10 years.
Into his dealings with the United Firefighters Union. And it came out, and lo and behold, it showed that there were, let's say, non-conventional negotiation means. They were in hotels, they were, backdoor stuff. And so I thought... this is another accessory for Dan's statue, and so I've redesigned Dan's statue.
So it's a three-header now.
Yes, the Holy Trinity. There he'll be with Peter Marshall from the United Firefighters Union, and of course his good mate at the CFMEU.
Yes, Johnny Setka.
Good old Johnny Setka.
There's a bloke with a chisel and a hammer. And
we have the sculptor working at this latest recreation of the statue, and he's saying, "Don't move."
Surely
don't move.
They're not going to actually make this thing, are they?
Well, I hope they do. It'll be a bigger draw. It'll be the biggest tourist draw card.
I looked at the other ones today. They're pristine. No one's, not even any pigeon stuff on them. But if Dan's gets done,
there'll be a moat of alligators or crocodiles around.
It'll be a permanent mess. Pauline Hanson, she's also been in Victoria. There was a lot of protests around her.
Yes. Pauline dropped in.
She's back. She's involved in the movie The Odyssey, I understand.
Well, I like to use the analogies of popular culture, and The Odyssey is taking the world by storm. Everybody's talking about this movie, and if you've seen it, you will see the scene from The Sirens, who are these women who lure people to their doom, and there she is luring the Labor
vote's going to go on the rocks.
and the Victorian Premier, Carroll, is tied to the mast telling his Labor voters, don't listen, don't look.
Pauline will love that, I reckon. We did, as I said, the Premier's, there's been a bit of changing of the guard at the top here.
Yep.
Bloke called Ben Carroll, who most people interstate would never have heard of.
No, neither Victorians probably.
He's a bit like the captain of the Titanic, you reckon?
Little bit. He reshuffled his ministry this week. Yep. And look, it's one of the great cliches, but it always works as a beautiful drawing. And, you know, there it is. It's midnight on the deck, and Ben is reshuffling his ministry. They have
a few overboard.
The SRL chair went. The suburban rail loop chair just went overboard.
What's on the iceberg?
Poles. They hit the iceberg named opinion polls, and if you look at the angle of the deck, Pricey, it's not a good angle.
Ship's going down quick. I wanted to ask you, because you've had fun over the last 12 years drawing Dan Andrews with the big ears.
Yeah.
Did he change much in the 10-year period, the way you drew him?
Yeah, the way we sort of create these templates.
Puffer jacket, of course.
Yeah, one during COVID he was in his, we had him in his North Face jacket, and then Johannes Leek was drawing him as in the Mao suit, the Chinese sort of communist suit, and then I thought, well, he's also a bit like Kim Jong-un. So I did him in the Kim Jong-un suit. So he morphed through various stages.
Speaking of Johannes Leek,
yes,
today.
Oh yes,
the managing director of the ABC,
the stick
had a stick inserted in a place that he probably wouldn't want. I wouldn't have thought.
Oh, a bit of bum humour.
So you did your centre, and then is Ben Carroll going to be okay to draw? I immediately looked and thought he's got a good head of hair.
Great head of hair. It's sort of Liberace come Elvis, and we'll be able to do with that. Do a lot with that.
We did well in the Commonwealth Games, a lot of gold medals, more than we could probably carry.
Yep.
They came back. Your take on that? You think Albo might be ready to slap them with a tax?
Albo never misses a taxing opportunity, and we have a swag of medals, gold medals, and you could just see them turning up at the airport and being made aware that there is a gold medal tax now.
I love that. I've written a column about Daniel Andrews. It's up online. It'll be in the Herald Sun tomorrow.
I have read it.
Have you drawn something for me this week?
I have, mate. It's a good one. You didn't hold back on Daniel.
No, I gave you a nice old...
For tomorrow, I thought, we're all talking about this statue.
Yep.
And I love that movie, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. But they will be carrying angle grinders.
He looks like Kim Jong-un from North Korea. Thank you, Mark. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And just quickly, Mark, that was one of the great weeks. He's done a great job. Coming up after the break, our panel will join us, and we will have a chat about a number of things, including a rant from a Victorian Labor MP who says, guess what? Victorians actually want more potholes. What fool said that? Welcome back. Friday night panel time. News24 contributor Joe Hildebrand and Executive Director of the Samuel Griffith Society, Mia Schlitt, join us. Welcome to you both. Great. I'm very tempted to each week have a quote of the week, because I want to show you quickly a grab from a Labor minister in Victoria in the chamber during the last sitting week. It's been doing the rounds on social media because it's so gobsmackingly stupid. Joe and Mia, have a listen to this.
So not everyone's on board with your pothole thing. They actually like it full of potholes. Yes, actually it is. It's the residents who don't want it resealed because they don't like traffic going down it. So they're quite happy to have it full of potholes, might I add. So not everyone's on board with your pothole thing. They actually like it full of potholes. Yes, actually it is.
Well, that's Sonia Terpstra, an upper house MP for the northeastern metropolitan region. I mean, Joe, seriously. Getting up in Parliament and saying people love potholes. Give us a break.
It's obviously completely insane. And even if the residents did like the potholes, we've got no shortage of NIMBYs in Sydney as well. It is not the government's job to allow them to wreck the axles of any passing or visiting car that might happen to be unfortunate enough to drive down that particular street. I think this is something that has got to be done. I think the pothole is almost a kind of, it's almost a barometer of how well your economy and society is doing. I think if you can't afford to fix the potholes and your streets are undrivable, it's a pretty clear sign that the rest of the economy isn't going particularly well either.
Yeah, Mia, I mean, it is an example of how rotten the state of Victoria is. And as you know, you're a Victorian. I went for a drive into country Victoria last weekend. And what the government does, Joe and Mia, but Mia particularly, they draw yellow lines around the potholes so that you're going at 100 kilometres an hour down a road. There's a deep pothole like that, and they think you're going to be able to avoid it because they've drawn a yellow line around it.
Oh, it's unbelievable, Steve. I don't know if this is just a sign that the Labor government here in Victoria has just simply given up. I'm not sure. I mean, it's really that usually at least we get some kind of fake press conference where they all stand up there and they promise to do better and they promise they'll fix the potholes and they'll promise to invest all this money into it. And of course, then the analysis comes and we discover that the Labor government here in Victoria has no money, so we all remain disappointed nonetheless. But the Labor government here seems to have skipped all those steps and we've just gone to the stage of acceptance of just saying, well, we've got the potholes, so now we're going to use them as some kind of traffic control mechanism. Like, how unbelievable is that? I mean, it just shows why the polls are tanking here in Victoria. It's because this government has absolutely no accountability. Not only can they acknowledge that Victorians here in this state are suffering, but then now they're saying that we just have to deal with it pretty much.
That's it. They've given up. I don't think there's any doubt about that, although Ben Carroll might try and do something. Joe, talking about politicians and crazy plans to dump projects, I mean, there's a debate going on about the suburban rail loop here, but the federal government has shelved the end of the inland rail line. Now, this is from Narromine to Narrabri, the section of the inland rail, after the cost blew out. Yes, it's going to cost a lot of money, but what's the point of having this inland transport rail corridor if it doesn't go to where it was supposed to go in the first place?
Yeah, that's my first reaction as well, mate. I realise it's a cost blowout and I realise that the government doesn't want to be throwing good money after bad, but the idea that you would just sort of leave this sitting around with literally, tens of thousands of sleepers just gathering dust is pretty intolerable. I think it's one of those things where, because it is something that is out of sight and out of mind for most people in the metropolitan regions of Australia, it's something the government has just been able to quietly cut. Whereas, of course, when you've got the suburban rail loop or the cross-city cross-city tunnel that Dan Andrews cut upon getting elected, it's something that everyone can put their finger on and see and get outraged about, or at least have a debate about. Whereas this is really vital for rural communities and farmers and the rural economy. And yet, before this article in the Oz, people almost wouldn't have known that it was just sitting there.
Mia, I was shocked today. Coles are going to move 1,000 jobs off to India, allowing the supermarket to cut costs. Some of these jobs were, I would have thought face-to-face roles that needed to be done. This is the problem that we're going to face with AI increasingly. That's a lot of jobs shipped offshore.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Steve, and it's a real sign that that the private job market here in Australia is on the decline. We're seeing hundreds and thousands of jobs across the sector being sent offshore because it simply is just too expensive to run businesses here in the country with the amount of red tape that we have that is strangling those private economies. And at the same time, the only businesses that seem to be booming are the public sector, which are growing at a rapid rate, which are far outpacing the increase of the population and government spending, of course, yet it's private businesses that are closing up shop and sending all those jobs offshore.
One word answer, Dan Andrews statue, yes or no, Joe?
No.
Mia?
Oh, it's an easy one for me, Steve. No way.
And from me, no. That's 3 no's. Ben Carroll, you got it from us. Scrap the statue. Don't do it. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you, my friend.
Talk to you next week. Coming up, Rowan Dean.